Hey everyone, talking about the top 5 best and the top 5 worst Creed scents. So, for reference, I've tried around 50 Creed fragrances, mostly unisex and masculine, but I have tried several or quite a few of the feminine leaning ones as well. This is just based on my opinion, not saying these are objectively the all time best, but let's jump into it, starting with the good, the top 5. One, Aventus, the 10th anniversary edition. And I know, apologies for how obnoxious that sounds to pick something that's like some special anniversary edition version, but out of all the ones I have smelled by them, this really stands out to me as something that I love the most. I think it's much better than the original Aventus. I think it's better than the Aventus Cologne version, even. It's almost like the Aventus Cologne version, but with a sort of like tropical twist. It has this just beautiful opening that's perfectly blended combination of like fresh, sweet, and citrus. I like that the pineapple here is actually a little bit downplayed compared to the original, which is obviously known for that pineapple note, but sometimes pineapple can be a little bit too syrupy to me. And I also find that the dry down of the 10th anniversary edition of Aventus is less earthy than the original, which I like better as well. For the beginning phase, it actually smells a little bit similar to like Raja Elysian to me, but without vetiver. And I can certainly see the similarities to the other versions of Aventus. The DNA is there. This is not radically different, but it's also not the same juice in a different bottle. Like some people will claim if you look at reviews that, oh, it's just a special anniversary edition bottle. No, this is definitely a different fragrance. I'm not a huge fan of the dry down of the original Aventus or Aventus Cologne, and this one smells noticeably different, just much like fresher and more pleasant and less kind of on that earthy side. Good longevity and moderate projection. Number 2 is another in the Aventus series, but the Aventus Cologne version. This is really nice, and I personally like it better than the original Aventus. Super fruity and fresh in a really light way, and also kind of has a little bit more of that tropical feel, a little bit sort of having parts like Raja Elysium in the earlier phases, combined with kind of the original, more smoky and more earthy Aventus. And especially if the original Aventus is too pineapple for you, I definitely recommend the Cologne version. I think it's, just for my taste, way better and really, really underrated, and often kind of gets lost in the shuffle when people are just talking about the original Aventus. Number 3, Selection Verte. This is sweet, spice, salty, and very green mint. I would say it feels like a fancy spa in the middle of a forest. It's almost toothpaste-esque on me in terms of the way the mint goes, but I would say actually in a good way, as weird as that sounds. It has that kind of minty freshness where a lot of mint fragrances sort of either fall flat and they either go too bitter or they go too sweet synthetic. And to me, this is kind of just really, really well done middle of the road mint. Middle of the road as in between those, not mediocre. This is a bit of an obscure reference, but if you've tried the soap Outback Mate by Lush, this reminds me a little bit of it. Good longevity and projections just okay. Next up, Love in White. To me, this is the best feminine leaning Creed fragrance, though I think it could still be unisex. It just smells so good. It reminds me a little bit of like Zoologist Cow or Jo Malone Green Wheat and Meadowsweet with this like creamy and soft, almost bucolic vibe. It smells so well blended. I don't think there's any one note that dominates. The actual notes are like orange zest, iris, daffodil, magnolia, rose, rice, vanilla, ambergris, sandalwood. I don't even like all those notes, but this mix is just really, really well done. And it smells niche quality, but the scent itself is very mass appealing in a good way. It also doesn't scream floral nearly as much as I thought it would. And yeah, it does lean feminine, but I think it could be unisex too. It's not like really, really over the top feminine leaning. It's just so like addictive and relaxing to smell. I love it. Yeah, this is actually one that even I would consider wearing, despite it being a little bit more feminine than my tastes are for what I like to wear, but it's just really, really well done. Supposedly, Michelle Obama wears it, along with some other prominent, famous people. Great longevity as well, and decent projection. Number 5, Royal Water. This is really green and fresh. Almost reminds me of a combination of 2 of my favorite fragrances of all time, Louis Vuitton Sur La Route and the House of Oud Live in Colors. It's, one of my favorite Creed fragrances for sure. It feels more kind of accessible and upbeat than a lot of other Creeds. That might not be considered a good thing by everyone if you're looking for something a little bit more challenging and more explicitly niche smelling in terms of the scent profile itself, but I really enjoy this. It has great longevity and moderate projection. Now on to the not so good ones. And apologies in advance if you love any of these, if you wear them. I'm not saying they're objectively bad, just for my taste. These are out of, the 50 or so that I've tried, the 5 ones that I really like the least. And with most Creed fragrances, I would say I think they're at least okay, ranging to, oh, this is really good. These ones, not my taste. Number 1, Chevrefeuille. Apologies for mispronunciation. Very screechy, bitter green on me. Like, with sweet honeysuckles floating around it at the same time, and it feels really clashing, like that bitter greenness and then that really high-pitched sweetness, kind of like almost if someone was trying to cover up a bad, intense smell by just spraying something lighter, but instead it just creates a bad combination of like clashing chords. It has a bit of a like mature soap type of vibe and a moderate longevity and projection. Next, I know I'm not going to pronounce this right, Acier Aluminum. Smells expensive, I'll give it that, but in a very old school way to my nose. The fruity notes here smell like real dried fruits, not the type of typical like sweet and bright fruit notes in more modern fragrances. That could be a good thing to you, but I don't like that kind of dried fruit type of accord personally. The spices here are of the kind of classy variety in that sort of potpourri vibe type of way that I don't enjoy. But if you like classy and more mature fragrances, you might totally feel differently about this. If you usually don't, I wouldn't even recommend trying a sample. And it has good longevity and projection. I will give it that as well. 3, Epicea, masculine type of old school gentleman sort of scent to me. Very green, but with like a smoky barbershop type of feel. Kind of like almost like a big fern plant sitting next to some aftershave. Not my type of thing. But again, I don't think it's bad for what it is. I just personally find it just really too old school and a bit like off-putting and stuffy. Good longevity, projection's not great for that one. 4, Feuille Vert. This smells like a slightly bitter garden in a forest with freshly rained on soil to me. Maybe not quite petrichor level in terms of that authentic rained on soil smell, but sort of that kind of vibe. The rose here is really traditional and dry. Not like pink pepper type of rose that's just kind of like sweet and bright and modern, which I certainly would have preferred here. Overall, this is just too earthy and green for me. But if you like, for example, some of the more mature leaning Parfums de Marly type of fragrances, obviously not everything they put out is like that, but specifically the ones they do that are like that with these kind of similar notes, you might like this one. It has a decent longevity and projection. Last on the worst 5, and I will say up front about this one, I don't even necessarily dislike it, but I'm including it because I think it might be the single most overpriced Creed fragrance of any of the ones I've ever tried, which is really saying a lot because so many of theirs are ridiculously overpriced, even ones I like. But this is sweet, but yet also indolic jasmine with like a creamy and sort of ambery touch. And it's marketed, I believe, as unisex, but this is absolutely more stereotypically feminine leaning. Just a heads up, whether that's a good or bad thing for you. It does smell nice enough, but I wish the jasmine was a little bit less indolic and a little bit more soft. It's just kind of a little bit too much at times. But yeah, the main critique that I would have is that there's so many jasmine-centered fragrances that are way better, or at least just as good as this, for a fraction of the price. The retail price for this is like $560 or something absolutely ridiculous. And to me, this smells more like a standard designer fragrance than niche, which there's nothing wrong with that, but they should not be charging almost $600 in that case. Yeah, sometimes I like that about certain Creed fragrances when they smell more designery in the sense of like, oh, really mass appealing, but with a really clear quality that designers don't always have at that level. But this, I just cannot sense anything unique enough about it to feel that the price is reasonable. But again, not intended as an insult. If you wear that and love it, awesome. Like, I wouldn't think it smelled bad on someone. I just don't get why it should be priced at that level. And yeah, that one has moderate longevity and projection. So I will put links in the description where you can get a bottle or sample of these. Some of them are discontinued, but I'll have a link where you can at least get a sample or decant size for any of them, so you can totally still wear them. Even if the bad ones, to my taste, sound good to you, yeah, I'll put out links for those as well in case you want to check them out. Overall, Creed, I think the number one theme you could say for them is overpriced. I'm also going to do a review at some time soon of that book, The Ghost Perfumer, that really tackles Creed's history and how much of it ended up actually being made up and fabricated. Interesting book for sure, and wow, about how many lies kind of Creed built about their whole backstory, but not going to hold that against the scents because I really do think they smell good. Obviously, there's some really classic ones I didn't include, like Green Irish Tweed and the original Aventus. Those are great too. This was just having to pick like 5 in each direction. But yeah, overall, I think that these are in the top 5 at least. Really, really nice. You can't go wrong with those. I think they would smell really great to almost anyone around you. The bottom 5 is really just more dependent on your taste. They're a little bit less mass appealing, more challenging, and in my opinion, most of those in particular are overpriced. If you have a favorite or least favorite Creed fragrance, let me know in the comments. And yeah, let me know if you end up trying any of these, what you think.